In this video, we'll discuss how to add and subtract fractions. Now, one important concept that we use when we're adding and subtracting fractions is the idea that we can write something like this using different numbers, and yet it's still the same fraction. So what do I mean by this? So when we have a fraction like a half, you could multiply this by the number 1, and of course that won't actually change what the fraction is, because 1 times something is just itself. But instead of writing a 1, you could actually write this as maybe 3 over 3, which is just a way of writing 1 as a fraction. But when you write it out this way, you can actually change the numbers in these fractions when you do the multiplication. So when you multiply two fractions, like this 1/2 with this 3 over 3, you multiply the top two numbers, so 1 times 3 is 3, and you multiply the bottom two numbers. 2 times 3 is 6. And multiplication for fractions is actually fairly simple, easier than adding and subtracting them. Notice that 3 over 6, 3 is just half of 6. Maybe you know how to reduce fractions, and you can see that 3 over 6 reduces to a half. And I just wanted to point out this little trick of multiplying by the number 1 written in a different way. So let's see how this can help us to add and subtract fractions. So let's consider an example like 1/2 plus 2/3. Now, when you want to add fractions, the tricky part is you need the same number on the bottom, or in other words, the denominators have to be the same. We can use this trick I did above to make those denominators the same. Now, how do you know which numbers to multiply this by so that both fractions end up with the same denominator? One way that always works, sometimes there's a smaller number you could use, but this method will never fail. You take the number on the bottom of the first fraction and multiply the top and the bottom of the other fraction with that number. And you take this number on the bottom and multiply the top and the bottom by that number. Okay, so let's do that. We've got a half, and I want to take that half and multiply it with 3 over 3. So this 3 is going to multiply the 1 and the 2. Just to write that out more properly, what we're really doing is multiplying a half by the number 1, so we don't actually change the fraction, but we change the way it looks, even though it has the same value. This 2/3, we're going to multiply the top and the bottom by the 2. So we've got 2/3, and we'll multiply that by 2 over 2. And on the next line, let's just work out what we have. So 1 times 3 is 3, and 2 times 3 is 6. It's the same as we did above. And the other fraction we're working with becomes 2 times 2 is 4, divided by 3 times 2 is 6. Now see how we ended up with the 6 on the bottom of both fractions? That's the important step, and that's the thing you need to do before they can be added. And the reason this works is we multiplied the 2 with the 3, and we also multiplied the 3 with the 2. So you're going to end up with the same number on the bottom, no matter what the numbers in your question happen to be. Now that they both have a 6 on the bottom, we can combine these fractions into 1. So there's a 6 on the bottom, and we get 3 plus 4 on top. Okay? You can only do that when these denominators match. Put them together. And once they're together, you can just add the 3 and the 4 to be 7 over 6. Now, this is a valid final answer, but mathematicians are a little bit finicky about how you write your answers, and they do not like having a number on top that's bigger than the number on the bottom. So just to make it look a little neater, we want to change that into a mixed number. So the way to do that is to ask how many times does 6 go into 7? It goes into 7 one time, and there would be one number left over. In other words, I can write that 7 is 6 plus 1 all over 6. Well, okay, let's leave it this way. And then on the next step, and this is more steps than you really need to do, but I hope this helps to explain a little bit how to go from this from this improper fraction to a mixed number. So we've got 6 over 6, that's just 1, and then we've got an extra 1 over 6 left over. So that is 1 and 1/6. And maybe you saw that directly from here, but this little bit just helps to explain that. Okay, so this 1 and 1/6 is just the final answer for adding a half and 2/3. You can see I did a lot of steps there, but once you get used to it, you don't have to write out so many details. Let's do one more problem before the end of the video, just to demonstrate subtraction as well. Let's just pick some numbers. Let's say 3 over 5 subtract 1 over 6. We'll do our same method as with adding the fractions. We're going to multiply the 3 over 5. Do you know which number? Well, we're going to use this 6. So we'll multiply the 3 over 5 by 6 over 6. And then we're subtracting 1/6, but we need to make these denominators the same. So we multiply the 1/6 by 5 over 5. Okay, so this fraction got multiplied by this number over itself, and this fraction got multiplied by this number over itself. On the next line, 3 times 6 is 18, and 5 times 6 is 30. We subtract 1 times 5 is 5, and 6 times 5 is 30. So again, we got these denominators to be the same. I'll use a few less steps than I did over here. I'm going to just directly go 18 minus 5. I can do that only because these denominators now match. And we have 18 minus 5 is 13 over 30. And we have a numerator that is smaller than the denominator, so that's a proper form. And one other thing you might want to check is, could this fraction be reduced? You know, like, for example, this 3/6, you could reduce that to 1/2 just to make the numbers smaller. And again, that's one of those neatness things. But looking again at this fraction, we see that it cannot be reduced. There's no common number that we could divide both the top and the bottom by to get smaller numbers. So we have our final answer. 3/5 minus 1/6 is equal to 13 over 30. You see how the answer has a 30 in the bottom, and that doesn't show up anywhere in the initial question. That's okay. That's just how it works out in subtracting and adding fractions sometimes. Okay, that's the end of the video for today. If there are any other topics you would like me to cover, just send me or just put it into the comments below the video.